You look like you were as lost as I was, though,
Yeah,
but
pretty
then I
much.
had a thought. Sometimes you just got to take a crack at it.
Yeah.
I got the first 3 words of this sentence. Let's just throw it out there and see what I get. So we start each week with one of us coming up with an idea for a character.
We make heroes. We make villains.
The fun show nobody gets to see. The best show happens backstage. That's kind of what we're saying is we're inviting you in to enjoy the parts of the process that we enjoy.
If anyone listening gets inspired to make something original for themselves, then we've done our job.
I think that even though the whole podcast is us creating the character, it's a podcast about writing process.
We forget it's a podcast and get lost in the story. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Mega Podcast. My name is Luke, and this is Adam.
Hey, guys. Luke and I are the creators of Megaton City News, a webcomic that you can aptly find at megatoncitynews.com. We've been creating things together. Well, how long have we known each other, Luke?
Oh, man. We've known each other since, I think, about the second grade. I think my first memory of you is I was standing alone at recess, and I saw you and one of our old schoolmates lurching towards me with your fists kind of pumping in the air, and you were chanting. What was it that you were chanting?
Human punching bag, I believe.
That's right, human punching bag. Yeah,
I'm not really a bully.
And you were much smaller than I was at the time.
Significantly.
But I think all I did was just kind of brush you guys off, smile, and just let it happen.
I remember you having a good laugh about it, and yeah, particularly you were the most good-natured person in the process of being bullied that I've ever encountered.
I think that early experience in the second grade actually set the foundation for our relationship moving forward for the rest of our lives. That need to just kind of make each other laugh no matter what.
Yeah, and I think that's set the stage for a series of creative pursuits, largely geared at making each other shoot things out of our noses and have a good time, and grew to include a broader audience than just you and I over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
And that was, I think, largely the spirit of, we had started talking about collaborating again a few years ago, I guess, right, when you first mentioned to me the idea of Megaton City and the Megas, which came out of a novella that you wrote.
Yeah, exactly. We, like you said, we'd been trying to come up with some ideas to start collaborating on. We hadn't seen each other for a long time, and just started reconnecting and trying to collaborate on. I think we tried some plays. We tried all sorts of different things, and then I had this idea for the team up, which was just it was a story about a handful of dysfunctional and incompetent heroes and a villain that are forced to leave the city where they've spent most of their lives and have to live in this small town to kind of rediscover themselves. But it was that story, that kernel of an idea for Megaton City News, that idea of just having this city that's full of utterly incompetent superheroes with absurd powers, supervillains who are even less competent in their ability to rule the world, let alone control a city, and then all the humans that are just kind of caught in the crossfire.
There's such a great, I fell in love with the concept kind of immediately, and there's such a great absurdity to it, and I mean, this is what I've always respected about you as a writer, is that I think you've got the best imagination of anybody I've ever known personally, in that you can take things to such a crazy extreme of without being gratuitous, while being fun and relatable at the same time, but combining things that would never be combined and creating characters and worlds that I think never would exist. And that's how I feel about Megaton City. And in a lot of ways, this podcast is about us bridging the gap between where we were throughout all the years that we were creating as kids, just making each other laugh, and really with a focus on the process for the process sake, to merge that with what we're doing now to really connect with an audience, and particularly this story, Megaton City and Megaton City News, and this sort of wonderful world that is a great platform for exploring all the foibles of humanity and our goofiness. And we're a couple of imbecilic goofballs that fit right in Megaton City, I suppose. It's kind of a microcosm of the bizarre world that we think we live in our brains anyway.
Exactly.
And so what this podcast is really us creating the inhabitants for Megaton City News, that it's about exploring the creative process. We start, essentially, we've been having these conversations about Megaton City News and creating characters and things that happen there for quite a while now. And the way that the podcast works is that we begin by one of us having an inspired idea for a character name.
The Be Mega podcast is really our opportunity to invite listeners into our creative process, to kind of draw the curtain back and see what goes on behind the scenes as we're making characters, as we're creating stories, and just really using our imaginations.
What you'll hear in every new episode of the podcast is a flashback to the previous week when a character name is revealed. And after that, you'll hear each of us present our ideas for an initial origin. So just the initial seeds of an idea for where this character came from.
From there, we collaborate to create a single origin story for this character.
And then comes the fun part when we add superpowers, special abilities, create a nemesis, weaknesses for the character.
When we've done all of that, we share the full origin story for the character that we've created that week. Well, Adam, I think we've explained enough of the podcast this week.
We've beat that into the ground, you think?
I think so. And I promise we will probably never do that again.
Probably.
So I think now it's just time to throw a few switches, turn a few knobs, and journey back in time to the initial character reveal.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy the first Be Mega podcast.
Previously at the Mega HQ.
I like to hang out at this coffee shop around the corner from my place, and I like it for a bunch of reasons. It's a good coffee shop. They roast their own beans and blah, 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 but I'm not really that picky, but it's nice and quiet. And one thing I like is that they've got bookshelves all the walls, and they're all full of books, and you can just take them. Just if you want a book,
Nice.
just honor system, take a book, bring back a book, bring a book. If you want to keep it, replace it with a
Brilliant.
book. Yeah, it's laid back. It's kind of a nice hippie coffee shop. Anyway, I'm into it. So, but then I sit there, and when I'm supposed to be writing, I just stare at the books and just like sort of stare at all the book titles. I don't read any of the books. I've never actually picked up a book and read it. That would be good, but I just stare at the book titles. But so I'm staring kind of across the room at a big red book called, I don't know if it's Tomo and Hawk or Tomo and Hawk. It's Bryce Courtney who wrote it, who wrote a book that I've read called The Power of One. That's very good. That was a really popular book. But at any rate, I didn't see it right. And it was this big red book. And so the character this week is what I thought it said. Tomato Hawk. Mega Origin.
My version of the Tomato Hawk's origin story is that a poor farmer trying to cope with worsening droughts was tricked into allowing an evil chemical company to test their water alternative on their tomato crop. After the chemicals have been used on all the tomatoes, and they've started growing, and they become huge. They're these giant, plump red tomatoes. The farmer is really excited and goes out and tries to eat one of these tomatoes, and immediately starts having stomach cramps and thinks that there's some sort of food poisoning at work, and passes out. And when they wake up, they discover they have these amazing new abilities.
Mega Origin number 2.
A tomato geneticist who worked for a large canned tomato company. So she stared at tomatoes all day, trusty mug of tomato juice at her side, Her deep love of tomatoes led her to this career, but now she was all tomatoed out. Her only pleasure in life came from walking her pet hawk, Jorge, in the evenings around the city, venting about her troubles. Occasionally, Jorge would snatch a passing rodent as they walked. One stormy night, she and Jorge were walking around the city when they were struck by a bolt of lightning, which reacted with the high levels of tomato acidity in her system. And with Jorge's talons digging into her shoulder, she was given heightened abilities, forever transformed into the Tomato Hawk. Time for the brainstorm. I mean, mine was a little long, which I knew, but other than that, they were pretty similarly structured. You're right? Like, it was the same concept.
Yeah, yeah.
Weird.
I almost thought that your character was going to work for the chemical company that I had set up.
Right? But she did work for a big company. Like, that was an important part of it to me. And I was like, wow, your character started in such a different place. I love it. I really liked the concept of the farmer, partially because it made the tomato thing so much more logical. I liked the idea of the tomato hawk being a person who worked for a large company, and that then would be a fighter for good causes.
Right. Maybe it's a former. Maybe they used to be a farmer and now they work for this larger company. I have to say, I really like your hawk. I like the hawk element.
Well, yeah, I thought that, yeah, that's a good point, is I do think the hawk element, because I thought, tomato hawk seems a little out of nowhere otherwise. At one point I was considering that the hawk would just be a thing that the character was enjoyed, that maybe she would have like a big hawk tattoo on her back or something,
nice.
she was this quiet tomato geneticist, but that she loved hawks. And that was then when I decided that she would just have a pet hawk. So it could be both, I suppose.
I like your.
I also really like her being female, just because for some reason tomato feels female to me.
Yeah, I
don't.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's just.
That's funny. I almost did the same thing. Like I kept it gender neutral.
Yeah.
And almost turned her into a female.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think your character starting as a geneticist is totally out of the classic tradition of comic book characters being like geniuses and
yeah, and why not then I liked the farmer idea better than like the canned tomato company and stuff. It never felt, I don't know, that felt a little forced or something, but I think I like the idea of the farm. So I mean, what if she's a tomato geneticist who
maybe she created the chemical.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So maybe she's trying to feed the world through tomatoes, and so she tries to create this. Maybe it's not chemical though, because I guess if she was a geneticist, it wouldn't be, or she could be a chemist, I suppose.
Or I like the genetically. How topical! How ridiculously topical!
Indeed,
she's a geneticist, and maybe she gets some pressure from higher up in the organization. Like, hey, we know that you have really good intentions, but we also have a lot of restaurants and all these other corporations that really want our tomatoes. So we need you to really bump up production.
Yes.
So then she has kind of a bone to pick with this company that it's part of her own hubris that causes this, but also
because she believes she can feed the world, but the company really wants to make more money.
Right.
So she tries to create higher yielding tomatoes, bigger tomatoes,
larger
basketball-sized tomatoes.
And maybe
she succeeds?
Well, I think she succeeds in one aspect, but they also maybe they do something to alter her design a little bit. So, like they're forcing her to use some sort of proprietary genetic mockery of nature that they want to use in this tomato. and she thinks things are going to be perfect, and she tries this tomato, and she's transformed, and then all that, like, they send these tomatoes out into the world, so all these other people start eating these tomatoes,
and then they all become tomato hawks?
and some of them become tomato hawks. Maybe not tomato hawk. Nah.
What if, I mean, yes, though, I think you're in the right range. What if it's that, so she's already yielding larger tomatoes than anyone's ever seen, and her cause is good, but the company wants her to inject them with this new serum, this new chemical,
Right.
that will make them basketball-sized crazy tomatoes, and ones that juice more easily and things like that work for them. But because she's such a lover of the tomatoes, she injects herself with the chemical first to make sure that it's safe.
I like it.
And she injects her hawk, Jorge. No, that got a little weird.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm doing this to myself and also to you.
Okay, so maybe not that part.
But
But I think the first part is good.
I like that.
Yeah.
So then the hawk has to get involved. Maybe
She eats the hawk. No, wait.
this poor hawk. Well, here's the question. Did the hawk survive this incident in your original origin?
Yeah, see, I was kind of leaving that up open for interpretation.
So what about this?
I guess I was kind of saying that they merged to one.
What if
Truthfully, I wasn't certain.
What if instead of testing it on herself, she tests it on one of her like prized tomatoes at home?
I like that.
And she tries this tomato, everything seems fine, and then she gets these powers. And also the hawk nibbles off of the tomato. So then they're like a duo. It's Tomato Hawk. It's her with superpowers, and she has this hawk who is also, does it transform her physically? Like, does she look like a tomato?
I had her looking more like a hawk.
Okay.
But that's okay. I kind of like the idea of her having the hawk. Yeah, I like the idea of her having the hawk as a sidekick a lot. I think they could be tomato and hawk.
Tomato and hawk together.
Team Tomato Hawk. Trying to feed the world one tomato at a time.
And the hawk is like this kind of tomato-shaped thing with wings and a beak.
And she wears like a tomato like head, or like a hawk headdress.
Yeah.
But her skin is all of tomato.
Yes.
Like the skin of a tomato. She's like a big, not big, but like, you know, like a in good physical shape, you know, hero, but with the skin of a tomato, like with the flesh of a tomato.
Well, we have the origin now.
Should we give her some powers?
This just in from Megaton City News. Wreckwood Estates residents report a slimy primate destroyed several homes before being dispatched by a flying tomato.
Mega power. So Tomato Hawk's first power is that her body can turn any tomatoes she consumes into tomato juice, which she's able to shoot through her fingers. So she shoots tomato juice, but she has to eat tomatoes to generate the juice.
Just to consume tomatoes.
So if she doesn't get any tomatoes, then she can't make any tomato juice, but she can store it. She eats the tomatoes and she can store the juice inside.
Nice.
So she has a certain reservoir. And she can also, it can be hot. She can make it hot.
Oh.
So boiling hot tomato juice if she
That's
needs
amazing.
to weaponize it.
Can she serve it as a meal if she
totally.
needs to?
She still has a cause for feeding people. So yeah, sometimes she goes around and serves hungry children tomato juice. It's a power that can be used both for crime fighting and good doing.
Mega Power.
So my first power for Tomato Hawk is is that she can fling prehensile tomato vines from a strange new orifice in the palm of her hands, and she uses the vines like lassos to capture enemies.
Tomato vines from a mysterious new orifice.
So her biology's changed quite a bit.
Yeah,
in this
quite a bit. She shoots
transformation.
tomato from her fingers. She can shoot tomato vines from a mysterious orifice in her hand.
She has a
I
juice
love it.
reservoir in her body somewhere.
Mega ability. So my second, it's more of an, I guess it would be a power. It's a sort of an ability, I guess. Applies to the hawk, Jorge. Jorge has the ability now that he's half tomato, or he's been overtaken by the tomato chemical. Jorge, the hawk, now has the ability to communicate with other fruits telepathically. And so they often use their fruit brethren in crime fighting, so they can stir together an apple orchard to throw apples, or they're able to use fruit to help them in their causes.
That is fantastic. So they can summon pairs to come and help.
Yes, precisely.
Special item.
The Tomato Hawk has what are called condiment bombs. They are specially formulated packets of explosive ketchup. They're created from some of her own privately grown tomato crops.
So she makes the tomato bombs.
Yes.
Nice gear. Does she throw them?
She tosses them. Yes.
Tosses them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Or
are they this like the size of tomato packets? Like they look like?
Yeah, they're just. I don't. Maybe she just grows little tomatoes, little cherry tomatoes, and throws them.
Oh, that's even better.
That would
The
probably
tomato
be
cherry. She grows tomato bomb because she's a geneticist.
Right. She grows cherry tomato bombs.
And the hawk can carry them and drop them.
Yes.
For an aerial attack.
That's perfect.
I picture now the hawk wearing like a crossed vest, like with all like these little tomatoes on
Yes.
it, or like vines. They'd just be vines that go across that are just like with all these little cherry tomatoes.
Picks them off and
Just
tosses
picking
them.
them off and dropping them. Nemesis.
The first enemy that I created for the Tomato Hawk is the sinister Gorilla Grub. It's an ultra-intelligent mutated gorilla who has consumed bananas that were treated with the same or grown with the same genetic modification that the tomato was that changed Tomato Hawk. And
I see. It got the same chemical in it.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah, the chemical.
So it's a giant grub.
It's a giant gorilla / grub. It has the head of a gorilla and the arms of a gorilla, but the lower half of a grub. Easy to outrun,
Yeah, I would think.
but still terrifying in an alley. And it just has this insatiable need to destroy humanity.
Weakness.
Tomato Hawk suffers from chronic heartburn from the acid in all the tomatoes that she consumes.
Oh,
So she has a limit to how many tomatoes she can consume in a day before she becomes totally disabled by this chronic heartburn condition. So she's trying desperately to develop a kind of tomato that doesn't give her heartburn.
Right.
And that's her side project.
so she's constantly taking antacids.
Eats a lot of antacids. Yeah.
Wow.
And now the moment you've all been waiting for. the mega origin story for Tomato Hawk.
Elaine Roma was a good-spirited geneticist who reluctantly worked for food conglomerate Lycodom Foodstuff, where she had developed ethical and natural processes for growing enormous tomatoes. Elaine avoided the greedy, opportunistic owners of the company by spending most of her time at the corporate farm with her loyal hawk Jorge, a former lab animal who now helped guard her as she conducted research. Despite the company's reputation for putting profits before people, Elaine was hopeful that her work might one day help feed millions. In an attempt to increase the size of Elaine's tomatoes, the owners of Lycodom forced her to spray the crop with an untested chemical called Lyco Slush. She instead tested the chemical on a tomato vine in her personal garden and watched with growing bewilderment as it grew before her very eyes. Awestruck and excited, she tasted it without hesitation. In mere moments, the mutagenic tomato transformed her skin into a red, durable membrane. The tips of her fingers exuded powerful jets of fresh tomato juice. She cried out for her hawk Jorge, who had apparently eaten remnants of the experimental snack and found that he too had been transformed into a winged tomato. Elaine swore to reveal Lycodom's sinister genetic experiments. She took to the streets and used her new abilities to protect citizens from a growing criminal element. Between epic battles with evildoers, she served fresh tomato soup from her fingers at local homeless shelters and grew a crop of explosive cherry tomatoes that Jorge could use to attack enemies. Rumors soon surfaced of another abomination caused by the use of Lyco Slush on bananas. This time, the victim was a mutated primate called Gorilla Grub, a super intelligent and criminally insane monstrosity with the torso and head of an ape, but the lower half of a giant grub worm. Elaine would go on to battle the Gorilla Grub on many occasions, saving the world time and again, and the public knew her as Tomato Hawk.
We hope you enjoyed creating the Tomato Hawk with us this week. You can find us on Twitter and share all of your Tomato Hawk thoughts at Megaton City and using the hashtag Tomato Hawk.
You can also visit our weekly webcomic at www.megatoncitynews.com.
Join us again next week when we'll create a new mega character. Hey Luke, one thing we didn't talk about the Tomato Hawk. Can the Tomato Hawk fly? Like the actual the woman hero, not the hawk. Can she fly?
You know, I think she can shoot the jets of juice out of her fingers. Yeah, just point her hands down and just, I think
she flies on a stream of tomato juice.
Yes. And paints the city in tomato juice as she flies.
You don't want to have your whites hanging out on the laundry line when the Tomato Hawk flies by.
Right. Well, and she would also, if she flies through juice jets, then because of how we talked about how she gets her juice jets, she has to consume tomatoes. She would have to eat a ton of tomatoes.
So she only flies in emergencies or special needs, special situations.
Yeah, it's not just a spur of the moment. Like it has to be planned. She's like, oh, I'm gonna have to.
She's not like late for coffee and like, oh, I'll just fly over there. I'll just plaster this whole part of town with tomato juice.
All characters and stories found in this podcast are property of Megaton City Creations. Copyright 2015.